Welcome everyone to this episode of the HR Tech Chat video podcast. And I am very, very happy to have with me today as our guests, the Vice President of Global People Operations, Jay Barrett, and Abigail Wilmore, who is Chief People Officer, both from Stella McCartney, very well-known retail brand, global. And I just would be remiss without saying right off the bat, I'd like to welcome you both to our Global Executive Advisory Council here at 360 Insights. You both recently joined. Thank you for that. Welcome. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. You folks have a very interesting story, and I think it's a rendition of what a lot of people have been experiencing over the past 2 years at the intersection of technology, people culture, and everything else, and some of the challenges around that, stakeholders in the organization and decision making around what technology to use. So without any more vagueness from me, welcome. And let's start with your culture. We have this pandemic that's happening, global pandemic. I think a lot of people are a little bit weary of the term. They just want it to be over. It's fine, but that doesn't mean it is. We have some issues around, especially for certain business models that are pretty challenging. And I know you folks have we've spoken previously. What was that like? What was your culture like? How has the pandemic affected it? And what are some of your prime directives? What are some of the things that you're doing to recapture or reestablish your culture?
So thank you for the lovely welcome. Stella McCartney is a really values-led organization with a really strong purpose in the world of fashion and in the world at large, to kind of change the way the fashion industry works. It's a vegetarian company set up on vegetarian kind of philosophy, but it's become so much more than that over the years. So it's 20 years old now. And so we have a lot of people who really, really, of course, believe in the values of the brand, and kind of wanting to input into changing the way that the fashion industry works. So it's kind of one big family. And I think the pandemic affected us greatly. Like a lot of retail companies, all our stores were closed across the world at different points during the pandemic, so it affected us a lot. But one of the kind of, I guess, advantages that we had was the fact that we had set up this kind of system universe of people tech, and so we were able to really listen to our employees during the pandemic and kind of navigate our way through that by really listening to them. And because we had a lot of these kind of feedback loops or systems in place to hear from our people already before the pandemic, it wasn't something entirely new. So we already had a social platform, we already had ways of engaging with people anonymously, and we already had that within our kind of system of working with our people. So that definitely helped us to navigate our way through the last 20 months.
What kind of systems, or maybe you could give us a little bit of for the audience, a little bit of insight into what kind of systems these are.
Okay.
Sure. So we the feedback tool that Abigail was talking about is Peakon, and it was something that we implemented well in advance of the pandemic anyway, and so we were already using it, and our people were quite used to using it by that point, but it was something that became extra valuable during that time. So Peakon was the survey tool, and not just empowering us to understand how people are feeling and what they're saying, but also our managers and our leaders of people to think about how their teams are feeling and how to address some of those key points for them. And then in terms of the other systems we had, in terms of an ATS, we had Lever, which we had introduced quite early on as well. And then we have Workday as our kind of core HR IS system. And we introduced Lever in advance of Workday. And then we have them all connected as well, so that we're trying to, Workday is our place of truth, and it's feeding all our other systems in our network.
What was in place previously before the because I know that you folks made a decision to go with Workday, if I'm recalling correctly from our previous conversation. What was this scenario like before that?
The scenario before that was a complex web of systems that didn't really speak to each other, and that's mainly because we went through a transition project that started in 2018 to move away from the group that we were part of and to set up an independent structure. And so in the group we were part of, we were reliant on shared services in the regions that we operate. And so they each had their own different suite of systems and processes and ways of working that were all kind of unique by country. So as we went through the transition process, the first thing that we knew we needed to solve was the HR tech. And so we wanted to bring in Workday and really take that as an opportunity to modernize our processes and ways of working, but also just have it connected to everything that we would need. So we really revolutionized the way that our employee databases were working, versus where we came from. And we were able to just really design how that would add value to us as a department going forward and the business.
So a lot of flexibility and latitude found in the implementation and the breadth of the configuration of Workday.
Yeah, that was partly because pulling away from a group, we had been set up with that group from the very beginning 20 years ago. And so absolutely every single part of the infrastructure was pulling away. So there was, the opportunity for us to say, oh, we'd love to manage this part, and we know kind of what's needed and where we would like to get to. And so we were able to do that, which is great. There's a lot of trust in the system, and there's a lot of autonomy at that time. And so long as we were in budget, of course, and the kind of milestones of the project were rolling along smoothly, and there was of course a lot of updating and ensuring that all the stakeholders and the board were on board with it, but we were able to really select the products that we wanted to have, and we had to back that up. But once it was approved, then we were able to go ahead, and that meant that we were really agile, because we're a tight team, and we could just move forward really quickly.
Oh, great. Yeah. Maybe you can share, one example maybe that stands out, that's maybe illustrative of how difficult it was previously and how much easier it is now. It's give viewers a sort of a peering little glimpse of what that's been like.
Well, I guess before, we didn't own those systems. We were users of them in the region, but each system was so different and tailored to its own market, and it was covering a wider population than just our employees in that region. And so I guess we didn't really have much say in how those systems worked or how the data was recorded or the processes, and we were very much just receiving some information from there. And so we would have to take information from sort of 10 different places probably, and then merge it once a month just to get a list of current employees. So it was very manual work. We did run a kind of, I would say, like a shadow HR system where we tried to keep just some basic information on our current people in one place, but it meant we were doing a sort of double entry, because we were maintaining the systems in country, but also our kind of central system. So it didn't really give us the benefit we needed, because it was just sort of more operational work. But then where we are today, and the big wins that we saw through making the change, was having that data, but also now being able to do some analytics that, before we're using our time just to get the information into a format we can use it. Whereas now we're starting to build dashboards so we can really quickly see information about our people, different trends, look back at how that looks previously, and just, I don't know, we're continually evolving now how we're using the information, what information we're capturing. I'd say since we went live with Workday, as we were getting ready for it, we had a lot of ideas about how we wanted to have things work. And then now that we're kind of 3 years in, nearly working with Workday, and kind of rethinking some of that now so that we can do it in a more valuable way and in a way where we can more quickly get the analysis that we need. So it's really revolutionized just the access to the information that we needed that would run all of our processes. And we're really starting to move most of our activities that were always done in Excel into the system. So the review process, the salary review, all of the compensation processes, for sure, sign-off processes as well in terms of hires. That was always very manual by email.
Did you say Excel? You said Excel for all that stuff?
Pretty much before everything that we were running globally for our people was done in Excel, because we didn't have a tool for it.
And how many employees sort of fell under your purview for this?
At the peak, it's like 1,100. So we're not quite that size now after the pandemic, but we're around 1,100 people globally, and kind of really dispersed as well, because we've got, of course, stores in many locations. So yeah, and I think from my perspective, going to board meetings or top level management meetings, I just don't see how we would have been able to come through the pandemic as successfully in terms of giving the board and management what they wanted to see in such quick turnaround time, because there was so much happening at once for every business. But there was a real reliance on not only people costs, but understanding what's really happening in the business, and as Jay was saying, different trends and things from the past and where we'd come from, and projecting into the future. And we just wouldn't have been able to do that at all if we didn't have this set of systems and that was really integrated, so we could pull really high level information and be really, really sure about its validity, which again, it just raised our credibility so much.
So we're talking about confidence in the information, which is increased, significantly, like tenfold, or I don't even want to put a number to it. But also, this is honestly, this is a classic, the classic fundamental story of sort of escaping an administrative hellscape, if you wish, if you will, right? And actually having technology that takes a lot of that away, because we're talking about a massive simplification of the process. Before, you were dealing with, I forgot how many regions it was, but how many different systems, but I think you said 10 or something like that. But I mean, in trying to just, in having to sort of take all of that data, reconcile it, and put into one place, one repository. I mean, that just blows my mind. I don't think I would survive in that type of maybe that's why I do what I do, but anyway. I mean, my hat is off to you, you guys. And Jay, I think from our previous conversation, I think I understand that you were sort of leading the charge on a lot of this data, sort of just reconciling, or just the collection of the data. If we were going to if we were to ballpark, it doesn't have to be super accurate, but if we were to ballpark it, how much time would you say that you're saving a month just in terms of not having to receive all this data from different sources and get them into one place where you can actually do anything with it? And we'll talk, just that piece of it. How much time are you saving?
I mean, that probably took us a good day and a half to get that information and consolidate it and cleanse it and get it to a point where we could use it. I guess in a way it's really hard to compare because our operating model changed so much. In that period where we were receiving information from the regions, we had shared services doing, you know, the transactional activity for us, and then we just needed the information to consolidate, probably just some basic information on our people. Whereas with the transition project we went through, everything changed, and so our department was now responsible for pay and reward or benefits on top of everything else. So there were things that we saved time on, like doing that kind of activity, but the technology helped just in so many ways, because also, you know, if we talk about payroll, we were now suddenly responsible for that. We chose a global vendor, we connected that, but now we had to kind of not just set that up, but think about the future of, you know, how the information is going from Workday to payroll, how we're getting the information back, and then how we're actually loading some of the actual data into Workday to other analysis. So it's really hard to compare the periods of time, because what we're responsible for now and what we're analyzing now is just so much more advanced than where we were. But back in those days, it was definitely about a day and a half, probably a month, to clean the data, go through it line by line, standardize things like job titles, you know, how we wanted to categorize people to do any kind of analysis.
Well, this is go ahead, Abigail.
No, I was just going to say, and that was just really basic information, like the reports that we're providing now in, you know, less than a day if needed to actually be presented. They're just vast in terms of the elements of information that is now in there. So yeah, that was just basic information, as Jay was saying, like job titles that would take a day and a half. So yeah, we would probably need about a month's lead time on some of the presentations that have been given over this last 20 months.
Yeah, well, this is a perfect example of where, you know, a time savings can be, you know, a day and a half's worth of time at this level is nothing to sneeze at. That's a significant amount of time. But at the same time, thinking about it through that lens really falls far short of capturing or encompassing, you know, the full weight of the change. I mean, what you're doing now, what you're analyzing now, you literally would not have been able to do
No.
without the new system in place. So there's that recalibration of the scope of your domain, for instance, right? Of what you do. B, there's been you're operating under an entirely new calculus now, right? Where you're able to your perspective or your strategy, right? The technology has enabled you, with a modern technology in place, a consolidated, streamlined modern technology in place for HCM, right? And I know there's a couple pieces to it. You've been able to actually think more strategically about your people, or you probably had these strategic thoughts, definitely had these strategic thoughts previously, but now you're actually able to act on them and provide information that to help, you know, build whatever case you're making at any given time. And that's the bigger picture, in my opinion. We at 360 Insights, we talk a lot about concrete and abstract HCM, right? And they're always kind of, you know, interrelated, but you know, the straightforward time savings that we talked about a moment ago, that's real concrete HCM. That's a time savings, financially quantifiable. Can definitely, you know, put a number to it and say, yep, that happened. Whereas some of this other stuff, which has potentially, or not just potentially, does have far more, much more far-reaching impact on the business, is what we call abstract HCM. It's not necessarily as quantifiable from a financial standpoint right away, because a lot of things that you're able to achieve from an abstract HCM standpoint, or we can call it from a strategic from your strategic perch, now strategic perch, that's going to cast a far greater impact over the business over a longer time, which is, you know, I'm probably making sense. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I think it's enabled us to provide the entire picture now. You know, we have all the kind of pieces of the experience at Stella McCartney, whereas before we had pockets of information, but now we have a way to make it all seem, you know, one story. And so we can add in, you know, the engagement data and well-being data and you know, subjects that were abstract, as you say, in some ways to quantify, and now much more quantifiable, because we have the systems in place to be able to paint that narrative of what's happening.
Can you share with us maybe one or two examples of strategic thinking you've been able to sort of follow through on because of the new landscape that you're working under?
I think it's probably, Jay, tell me if you have some other good examples, but I think probably in terms of hybrid working, you know, and understanding, moving from talking about the fact that people would like more flexibility in their work from, you know, the last few years, all the way to being able to actually provide, you know, the statistics around how many people, you know, want the various different options that we're going to have to you know, envision as a policy and create for people. We're not there yet in terms of hybrid working, but again, before it would have been very much about what I think or what each HR person is picking up, as opposed to now we have valid data, we have valid comments from people, and you know, we something like that, I think, has been, it's helped us dramatically to figure out. Can you think of other?
I think it's just also helped us on the visibility of who's actually in the company, which we always had being in HR, but the rest of the company didn't necessarily have when we, you know, people's information was in different systems, and it was, you know, at least now with everything being connected, you can see who sits within which department. You know, I guess there's like a feeling of more transparency about the structure of teams and the business as well, which we didn't really have before, unless we were providing maybe org charts to someone senior who needed it. But for the wider business, they would never really have access to anything like that. So I think it's definitely helped in terms of who does what and how to find the right person, and then having that linked with our internal comms platform as well.
And
then I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that helps with workforce optimization, obviously, right? You know,
definitely.
Definitely.
I mean, we've had so many reports on, you know, headcount information and again, how many vacant positions we have in the business at any one time, you know, which again has become more critical in the last year, where we've seen so many people resigning across industry. And then I thought of the other kind of big strategic advantage that this has given us, having all these systems, is a bit more trust as to why we might ask our employees about their backgrounds. So yeah, we still can't do that in every country legally, but where we can, the fact that we've got this social platform to be able to communicate why we want to collect data on people, and then the system to collect data, and then also Peakon, where you can input that data anonymously to then be able to, you know, to look into and have visibility on what different demographic of our organization is caring about the different initiatives that we're doing. That is, you know, invaluable.
Yeah. In the United States, I don't know anything about being asked about my background at work. But anyway, I think so. But yeah, that's a great example of, sort of the fluidity of the regulatory landscape, or the variation in it. Excuse me. By the way, Abigail, you're based in the UK, right?
Yes,
You're speaking with us from the UK today, right? And,
yes, from
and
London.
Jay, you're in New York City, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm about 4 hours or so away from you in Southwest New Hampshire. But
Mm.
as far as you two are concerned, I mean, this is a great example of just how global Stella McCartney is. How many countries do you operate in?
We are in 9 countries.
Yes,
9. Okay, okay.
yeah.
Is it mostly EMEA and North America, or is it other regions as
We're
well?
across Asia, Japan. Japan's actually one of our most mature markets. So we've got a lot of stores across Japan and Asia Pacific.
So this is a very geographically dispersed
Yes.
company. Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
even on top of that, in some of the markets, our stores can be very far from another store. So
Mhm.
it is, even within country, very dispersed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this kind of information is absolutely critical that you're talking about. One of the things that's, it always amazes me how many large companies literally don't know who they have. There's no one way to figure out, it's a big process to figure out who they have, and the skills, and it makes it almost undoable to be agile in the way that you're describing, Jay. And just going back to your example, Abigail, around strategy and having the information to back it up. We talk about 360 Insights around, again, concrete and abstract HCM, and how every aspect of HCM has a concrete and an abstract element to it. So, you have a strategic idea that's legitimate, valid, and rational. But the goal, the objective, is to find some way to quantify it, some way to show, when I say quantify, to show some data in support of it. And that's really the key for HCM, folks working in people operations and culture and whatnot, right? To be able to advance their ideas, they need sort of hard data to back it up. So it's just another, I would say it's another argument, one of just myriad many, in favor of having a modern system in place for that. Yeah. So I know
I
that.
would also add to
Go ahead.
that, sorry, just that for us and the project we were going through, and where we suddenly became responsible for payroll, which is something you can't get wrong. There's a lot of checking you need to do, audit process, to be able to control that process efficiently. That's what the technology did. And we tried to keep a kind of global approach to that. So we didn't go market by market with, this is how we're going to work in this country. We really came up with a sort of global framework of how we would organize that, to have the control, to have the sign off, to have the audit checking, to have the analysis. And then from there, sort of regionalized it if we needed to. But we took one global partner for that as well. But yeah, we really used the technology to just help us absorb those new responsibilities as well that came our way.
Yeah, I know that and I want to get into this because I know that because one of the things that we do at 360 Insights, we're very keen on learning about, how stakeholders work within organizations and the decision making around what type of technology to use and whatnot. Maybe you could, one of you, or could share a little bit about what's on the horizon here, what's in the future, what are some of the future plans around Workday and this sort of stuff at the organization?
I'd say we've got Workday to a fairly advanced stage now, because we have quite a few modules, and we're in our third year, about to go into our fourth year of having the tool. And because we've come through that transition project now, and everything is settled and fully kind of joined up, we moved one of the final payrolls during this year that had been more of a complex project, but is really just now, I think, about the other enhancements and the other business challenges that we can answer, and then really about how we use the data and what kind of insights we can create. Because, you know, going back sort of 4 years ago, we weren't doing anything very special with data and analysis, but now we're in such a different space. So I think and now that that transition project is over and we're kind of back to business as usual in a way, it's really how we're using this data, what stories it's telling us, and then how we're going to influence decisions with that, rather than any kind of big next phase for us with the systems. It's kind of there, really. I think it's a pretty established phase. So now it's just how we continue to pull value from it.
We haven't had, for example, like an HR scorecard like some businesses have. We could easily do that now. We could have really, you know, set KPIs for HR that we are communicating on a regular basis. We've had to work in a very kind of reactive way over this last 20 months because of the needs of the business, and just providing what we thought would be valuable, but also what we're being asked to provide in really short space of time. But now, kind of through that period, it would be, as Jay said, about setting up a more structured way of providing the business with what it needs to make future decisions, because it feels like we've had to be quite reactive.
How was the use of Workday? How is it sitting with some of the other stakeholders that you work with in terms of deciding what software to use and these sorts of things?
We've been quite a self-sufficient HR function, which I think is not the usual setup. We have, in some way, we have some financial responsibility because we also manage payroll, as I mentioned, but also everything to do with the personnel budget. And we chose and implemented Workday ourselves, and really going back to that transition project where everything changed in our business, we didn't necessarily have a built-out IT team as a partner in the beginning anyway. So it is unique that we've completely owned that project. And I would say the whole business is definitely reliant on the system, and it's connected to IT through the Active Directory. But definitely as those teams have changed and grown out, because it was a new function, just probably the understanding is, you know, slightly different as to why we made certain decisions and why we have this tool and why it works in this way. But there is obviously the whole story as to why, which is where we came from, being in a place where we had to rely on 10 systems that we didn't even own.
And using a tool like Peakon, that's not really, that you couldn't replace that with a sort of other off the I see you shaking your head, Jay. What is it about that tool that's maybe we could just give me a little bit more, give us a little bit more insight into that, why it's so useful.
Yeah, I think we were quite early adopters into Peakon. Obviously now it's part of Workday. But I think what was so great about it was, prior to that, we had relied on a kind of annual survey that would then take maybe 4 or 5 months to get the data back. And then we'd have to analyze all of that in Excel and then come up with an action plan. And by the time we were really doing anything with it, so much time had passed that it was kind of irrelevant. And so Peakon just gave us that kind of immediate answers as to how people were feeling, what was important to them. The way it categorized, you know, the questions under the drivers really helps you to pinpoint the sort of areas that you need to focus on. And I think the fact it empowers the managers as well, which not something we did right away, but eventually we gave it to them. And Peakon also provides some guidance for them, so they can have more responsibility over the engagement of their team and kind of support on how to action plan on some of the issues. So I think it also took it away from just being the kind of assumption that HR needs to fix all the things that everyone is not happy with.
This is, I love it. So, it's essentially an employee sentiment gauging tool, and it's real time, or it's continual, as opposed to being annual. And you're absolutely right about those annual surveys. By the time you collect them and analyze it, it's old information. It's like you said, irrelevant. Being able to gauge the pulse of your employee sentiment right now, given how much your operating model has evolved because of the pandemic, with hybrid working and all this, to me that just seems indispensable. And one other thing that's super interesting for me with that is, also with the annual employee engagement survey or employee sentiment survey, that puts the onus of responsibility for it solely, like you were saying, solely in HR's hands, right? Whereas with this sort of pulse, and it may not be referred to technically as pulse, but with this sort of pulse survey tool, right? You're pushing that the responsibility for that out closer to the front lines, where frankly the employee sentiment actually happens, right? So it's pushing that out to its more logical residing place. So to me, that's the, just hearing you two speak about this particular tool, it seems to be very strategic.
Definitely, it's a business tool now, and it means that people feel heard, because the other thing about taking 6 months and it not even being relevant information anymore is that people are like, well, they can't connect what they've said with the initiatives that are happening in the company. So yeah, it means that people feel something is being done. And it makes the engagement in the system higher. So going back to any other kind of way of hearing from people, I mean, we still hear from people in different kinds of networks and forums as well, but that's obviously not anonymous. So the fact that this has the anonymity attached to it was definitely quite apprehensive to go all in, because we survey people every 2 weeks, or every 2 to 3 weeks we ask 2 or 3 questions, and initially that can seem quite overwhelming for managers to suddenly have insight into what their employees are thinking in real time. But over time, if you do actually take action as a manager, then it becomes invaluable.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned was the immediacy of it, and how employees, they an aspect of being heard is, if there's no immediacy to what you're communicating to the other person, then it's like not being heard, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about fostering a strong employer culture under more challenging circumstances than normal, right? Then one of those things is, one of those components is trust, but the other is, employees want to be heard. So this is just, it makes absolute sense. It
enables you to respond quickly to what's happening. And if you have to wait 6 months before you can take action on feedback, it's probably too late. It's either a bigger issue now, or that person's just disengaged and maybe even moved on. So it just allows you to take action more quickly. And the fact that you can actually have a conversation with an employee through the tool as well, still all anonymous, but you can either acknowledge or you can actually respond to some things. And I think that as well, goes back to that feeling heard. And sometimes it is a great suggestion, and you can say, we're either working on it, or we're going to take it on board, or actually maybe you missed this because we did already address this.
Well,
or we did something.
It's so important to be responsive, in this, where we are right now as a planet, right? It's so important to be responsive for an organization like yours. That's really, doing everything it can every day to retain its people, given the nature of your sort of high-end retail, and you want to have those well-skilled folks who know your business, being those emissaries for your brand to your customers. So it's important to have that strong link there. I was just looking at the time, and we've been talking for a while, and we're almost out of time. So it's just this is so interesting, and you have such a big challenge that you're surmounting very well. It's so exciting to hear about how Workday is helping you with that, and with the employee sentiment tool with Pecan and everything. And I just want to wish you luck and the best of luck with those tools moving forward. And I think things are only going to get better for everybody, and including Stella McCartney. And also I want to wish you all happy holidays, and thank you for joining us.